Hello, everyone, and welcome to Redesign Your Life Today. I'm Daniel Kobryner, your host. I'm a mental fitness coach. And as you know, in this podcast, it's all about transformation. It's about having guests sharing inspiring stories and having a lot of things that really can resonate with all of us. And today, I've got the immense pleasure and privilege to receive a very special guest. It's Beth Pellino-Dudzic. And Beth has a really interesting story. She was born in New York in the Bronx and she grew up in Westchester County. She earned a BA in business administration. She worked at IBM. She's got three daughters, a granddaughter, and now she lives in Alabama. And Beth has different passions, but she's writing books and she's writing books about different subjects, and we'll talk about this. But one area is about music. She's passionate about music, about rock and roll from the 70s, and she's an expert in this matter. She loves as well football and a lot of areas. So look, this is a very short introduction, and Beth, I'd like you to expand a little on this and tell us who is Beth.
Okay. Well, yes. I am a native New Yorker, which I'm extremely proud of. Growing up in New York, you don't realize how lucky you are until you get older because we have a certain kind of mentality in the way we carry ourselves. But being a teenager, in New York was there was no way you couldn't get away from music. At 14, I was going with my friends, going to see concerts in Madison Square Garden and all the big bands at the time. And that is fun. That was something that a lot of people don't get to do unless you live in a big city and you have so much in front of you. And so I did that. And as I got older, I met somebody and I started dating him. He was, of course, older than me, and he was a roadie for one of the they were the biggest club band. And in New York, from the mid 70s to 80s, the club scene was very big.
Mhm.
Um, if you had a following and you had a name, you were mentioned on the radio, they're playing at this club. So I got in with that band. And the relationship I had with the person I was dating ended up where we were best friends. And he still is my best friend to this day. And I do love him dearly. But because of him, I met all the guys in the band, and I was very close with two of them. And they even met my daughters. And so it went to that point. And then, I would go to the clubs. My name would be at the door. And, there's a certain, you think, well, look at me. My name's at the door, whatever. It also introduced me to other people in other bands. And I did start dating somebody serious. It was a serious relationship. So I lived the rock club scene life, which at the age that I was wonderful. It was you were in the mix. And at that time, record companies would come see bands. And it was if somebody liked you, then you did a demo. and then the record company would say yay or nay. It's a lot different now, but back then that was a big thing. The most important thing that a lot of these bands had to have was original music. So they could be a great cover band. And my friends were, I mean, they were just the best of the best. Um, but if you didn't have your own material, then you're nothing but a great club band. So living that lifestyle, like living on 3 hours of sleep, actually, because you get home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to go to school. Um, but in this, being around this, I did want to sing. I did want to be part of a band. And I did have two girlfriends, and we were going to try to create a female band, but that didn't go very far. But then, being the age that I was, I never thought I was good enough. I didn't think I was pretty enough. I didn't, you have all that self-doubt, and that self-doubt takes you over when you're younger because, it's, you feel all those things. And in the meantime, a friend and I were friends with a gentleman who was the promotional manager for a very big record company. So he would say, "Hey, I got backstage passes for you. Come meet me at the garden." So yes, you in that lifestyle, and it's fun. And at the time, there were a lot of, and I'm going to be very real, there was a lot of drugs that were flying around. And there were a lot of groupies, and I was not one, but I saw how they worked, and so it was a fantastic lifestyle. And then, as I was finishing school, um, I said to my parents, I'm thinking about going into acting or singing, and my parents just said, "No, you're not. You're going to do something where you can actually make money." And so that's why I went with a business admin degree, because I knew I could get a job. And in the music scene, in the rock world, when you start to put your foot into, let's say, the real world, where you have this very straight job and you're making money, some people call you a sellout because you're selling out to that lifestyle. Um, and I had my foot in there for a little bit still. Um, and then, my work environment as a young girl I worked for one of the, back in the day, big eight accounting firms. And, people would think accounting firm. Oh, but so much fun. I mean, yes, there's stereotype accountants, but there are a lot of guys who are a lot of fun, and we had a group of friends. And so once you start transforming into that, not that music left me, it was just that I wasn't going to the clubs every 4 nights a week. I was like, I got to get up and go to work. And then from there, gosh, I have to say it the way it is. There was somebody that I worked with, and he was constantly asking me out. And I said, "Look, I have a boyfriend, and kind of leave me alone." And for 5 years, he just would not leave me alone. And we had a bet on a football game because I'm a New York fan. I love my Jets and Giants. And he was a Dallas Cowboy fan, and still is. Um, and so I made a bet knowing it was for lunch. I said, okay, if the Cowboys beat the Giants, I'll take you to lunch. And I did lose a bet, and I was going to take him to lunch. And he then took me to a very well-known steakhouse in New York. And I don't know why, Daniel, but he started whining and dining me. Going to the Rainbow Room at 30 Rock and all these. And the woman who was my mentor, I mean, she was grooming me to take her job. She said, "Oh, just go out with him once and, whatever." And I did. And like in other relationships I had, that I did not want to go out with the person, but they were so relentless that I caved. And every time I caved, I knew it was the wrong thing. So I did cave and I started dating this person, and he was so polar opposite to me. I was still, I still have my friends in the rock world. He was not at all like that. So he got a job in Hawaii. And I was like, okay, the relationship's going to end, right? And I was good with that. And he kept coming back to New York for like 3 months. And I had an ex-boyfriend who was abusive, who was stalking me. And so that wasn't fun. And the worst part about it is that he knew who my father was. My father was a wise guy. No, there's no other way of putting it. My father was very well connected. Um, and we don't ever say the word. I said it once to my father, and he said, "What's that?" But I always grew up knowing that we had something in our family that was different, and you just never talked about it. And my father hated him. So, um, yeah, my father kind of took care of it, but he still stalked me. And so this guy who went to Hawaii, he said, "Why don't you move out there?" And because I felt this person won't leave me alone, I said, "Okay, I'll go to Hawaii and I'll stay there for about a year and whatever." My father bought me a return ticket home. They held my job open for me at the accounting firm. And I lived in Hawaii with this person. And I did end up working at a big advertising agency, which is, it's interesting how different fields are different. Like accounting firm, then I worked for an advertising firm, and then I'll get to IBM later. But so, but I never felt at home in Hawaii. It was like very far away. I missed my family, and I told him I was going to go back. It was a year. I told him I was going to go back. And the abusive boyfriend somehow, and we're still using landlines. There was nothing called cell phones at that time. If you wanted to talk to somebody, it was the good old landline. And I don't know how he got my phone number, but he called me and said, "I'll be waiting for you when you get back." And yeah, so this person proposed to me, and I was just like I went into a marriage knowing that it was the wrong thing. Let's put it that way. And my parents, I was the only daughter, and my father gave me two weddings actually, one in Hawaii that was at the best hotel that Hawaii offered. And then I also had one for family and friends in New York. And I was like so not excited about my wedding day. And my mother said to me, uh, you know, are you okay with this? And I said, it's too late to change my mind now. And my father, as we were getting ready to walk down the aisle, said, "We don't have to do this." He said, "We can have a really great party at the hotel." And I said, I'm in this. I'm there. I'm going to go through with it." And I did. And so I was living in a place that, a lot of people think Hawaii is great. It's great for a vacation, but to live, talk about culture shock. People say to me, "Gee, isn't there a culture shock with living in Alabama?" And it's like, not really, but the culture shock that I felt was when I moved to Hawaii. And I won't go into the nuances, but it is very different. And again, I never felt at home that that was my home, even though it was. And I lived there 17, 18 years. Um,
In Hawaii.
in Hawaii, in Honolulu,
Wow,
yeah.
17 years. And how did you come to Alabama then, if I may ask?
Oh, well, I'll get to that. Um, so I had my three daughters, and that was the only thing that I could say was the good part of my marriage was that I had my daughters, and I got to be a stay-at-home mom because my ex-husband did very well and came from a very wealthy family. So, yeah, I was living a great life. I was living a great life, but wasn't happy at the same time
Hmm.
because people think just because you have all these things and of course you're happy. Why wouldn't you be? People would die to be in your position. And I wasn't. And I was very involved in my daughter's school. I worked as a substitute at their school. And in Hawaii, you send your children to private school. So, of course, they went to the best private school. Um, and just, I went through the motions of being that executive wife. And I threw really great parties that people wanted to go to. And so that I immerse myself in my children and
Hmm.
that kind of life. And I did have some really great friends there. I'm not gonna lie. There were some great friends. But I started getting the itch. And one of my best friends that I still have to this day, we used to walk Diamond Head. We used to walk around Diamond Head and we would do this 10-mile walk every day. And we had a little business going on, and I just looked at her and I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I am miserable and I cannot stay another day here. And I said, and I'm married to somebody that I don't want to be with. And it's just, I should never have done it, but I have my daughters, so and she started to feel the same way. And so here we are, the two of us talking about, okay, we've got to have an exit strategy. And we became so, we both filed for divorce, and people at the school were like, they couldn't believe that we could do that. Like, my ex was on the board of directors of the school, and my friend's husband was, would do all this audio visual stuff and they were like, "What's wrong with you?" And I just would say to people, I am not happy. I don't want to live here anymore. I am not happy in my marriage. And people again were saying, "Why? You have all this stuff." And I said, stuff doesn't mean anything when you're not happy. So I went through a very bad divorce. And it took a while because I was taking my girls out of the state. So that was a big thing. And I said, I'm moving back to New York. I want my daughters to have that New York edge because they were starting to be, tweens. And I said, no, I want them to have that New York mentality, not the Hawaii mentality, where there are people who don't ever leave the island. They like that. And I did not want that for my daughters. So went through a bad divorce. I got a judge to say she can leave and take the children. And I still wasn't divorced yet, though. So I did. And, I have family in New York and my brother, who was right underneath me. He was a big help. And then another brother of mine was there. So, I had two of my brothers and, aunts and uncles. And so moving back felt just very right. And so the divorce proceedings are still going on, and I'm getting very good child support. I did not get any alimony, but I did get a job at IBM, and I went to be interviewed, which was a half a day process. And the next day, I got a phone call saying, can you come for another interview? Because IBM has all these different parts of them. So I said, yeah, of course. And I got hired that day. And when I would tell people that, there are people that would wait like 6 months to a year to get a
Mhm.
job with them. And I got a job right away.
Wow.
Yeah. And so IBM is so different from any other place I ever worked because they had all these acronyms and you had a, if you don't know, So I remember the first 4 months, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. This is like so different from any job I ever had with the way they did things. But then it just all of a sudden everything came to me. I worked for an executive vice president. I had a great job. Uh, I was very lucky. And so I was a single mother and I enjoyed that. Um, it wasn't, I felt that going back to work at the ages my daughters were, I had laid the foundation for them. So mom going to work wasn't as big of a deal.
Mhm.
And I did buy a house all by myself. It's it's releasing this. I can do this all
Yes.
by myself. And I don't need, well, I felt I didn't need a man at that time. I was just very happy being who I was and very confident. And, I was lucky. My daughters were not bad kids. I may have found one smoking some weed and stuff like that. And I'd be like, oh, okay. But, you need to chill it because they knew, like, my brothers would tell my daughters stories. And I'm like, why are you telling them this stuff? I don't want them to know this. But yeah, so I became a single mother, worked at IBM. And then finally, a year after I moved to New York, I finally got a divorce. The divorce was final. Um, and the sense of freedom that I felt was unbelievable. So, the one thing that I would say to any woman out there is if you're, and some women are afraid to take that step because it's a scary step to say, okay, um, because you never know what your child support is going to be. You never know those things until you're into it. Um, But a lot of women won't take that step because divorce is expensive, number one. When you have children, it's even more expensive. And I would say it's a scary step, but if you're not happy, you need to take the step, no matter how frightening it is. You
Mhm.
will be fine. You will be fine. And for me, that's the way it was. It was bad until it was over. And then the freedom you feel from that is tremendous. Um, and so then enjoying my life, dated, but not, my children were always my focus. And the friends of mine from that band would come over and, we would have Thanksgiving together. Um, if they sometimes would play in a park, I would take my daughters. So, I was introducing them to that part of my life. And they were sort of like, oh, yeah, okay. So mom really was this person who was involved in all this stuff. And I did raise my daughters with music. I raised them with the Rolling Stones, Van Halen and Pink Floyd, everything. And because I wanted them to have that music knowledge, which they appreciate as they're now young women and they appreciate it. And sometimes I listen to their playlists and I'm floored that, it'll be something that I introduce them to and I'm like, oh, okay, so I really did do something good.
Well,
Um, and it was about 6 years later, and I did not believe in online dating at all. And my boss put me on Match.com, which was the big, at that time, the big online dating site. And I never did anything with it. I would see the things come in every day and I would delete them because I didn't believe in online dating. And then in IBM, they change their, vice presidents a lot. They move them to another area. So then I started working for a woman. Wonderful. My experience with working with a female boss has always been extremely positive.
mhm.
And the men I work for were extremely fantastic. Um, so she came around, she was looking at my computer and she said, "What is this thing, Match.com?" And I explained to her how I got on there, and she said, "Open it up." And I said, "Oh, I don't want to open it up." I said, "I delete them." She said, "Open it up. I want to see. I want to see the person who's on there." It was my husband. And I was like, "Okay, he's not bad." And so she would be going to meetings and she would stop by my desk and she said, "Did you send something? Did you say you want to, meet him?" And I'm like, I don't really want to do that." And I did it. And we talked for a couple of months and then we met each other and then boom, I've been married to him for well over 20 years. So, yeah.
Wow.
But with all these things that happened to me, and I believe that and this is another thing I want to say to women especially, a lot of women get scared when they reach the 40-year mark. It's like, oh my God, I'm 40. And I will say, it is the most wonderful feeling to
Mhm.
get to that point because as a woman, you know who you are. There is you've gone through your 20s and all that. You've gone through your 30s and you've had your children. And then bing, it's like, I know who I am. I'm not going to allow certain things to happen, and I am so confident. And it's a wonderful, freeing experience also to get to that point.
Wow.
Yeah,
Such a
no,
fascinating story. Thank you so much, Beth, for sharing. And there's so many things here. And so
I
first,
don't.
it's about, you know, something was very interesting is that when you said you had kind of doubts about marrying this person, and even your father said it's all right, but you
Yeah,
still went. Go
I did.
thinking backwards. Would you have
Done it again?
yeah.
You know, so this is my belief. There was a point in time where I would tell you, no, I would not do that again. However, that marriage produced my three daughters, and my daughters are my everything in my life.
Ah, so this is their father. Okay, right. This is
So,
okay.
but I always tell them, no, you're my children. I said, your home was with me, and then I gave birth to you, and then I took care of you. It was mom, 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 always mom.
Mhm.
Um, and I also believe, and I don't know if you ever saw this movie. There was a movie years ago called The Butterfly Effect, which I watched once, and I would never watch it again. And it shows you how if one thing changes in your life, and it could be a small thing or it could be a big thing, the ripple effect in your life just changes your life.
Absolutely.
So, yes, would I do it again? No, I want to say no, but when I said that once, my daughters are like, well, that would mean that we wouldn't be here. And so I thought about that and I said, they're correct. They wouldn't. So, yeah, I think that your life gets laid out in a certain way,
Hmm.
and we have to take there's like I've had some bad moments in my life that were really dark and depressing, but it has made me a much better person to go through the dark
Hmm.
because you're always going to end up in a better place from it.
Yeah.
If you have the right mindset.
Exactly. So
And
you take life as a lesson, don't you? It's like things happen, and afterwards it's what we make of that. And if we
exactly,
think that we can learn something which is going
exactly.
to bring us to another path, this is
Yes,
where we have growth.
exactly. And so that's why I say the bad things make us see things differently, and we always come out the other side. And I believe in that. You come out the other side. So, I'm living my life, and my daughter's graduated college. I'm still in New York and I'm loving it. And my husband was from Connecticut, but by the Massachusetts part of Connecticut. And when I met him, I said, I will say one thing to you. Don't ever ask me to leave New York because I won't. And um, so my house, I sold my house because we were downsizing. And then the most miraculous thing happens is that your children graduate from college and then they come back home.
Hmm.
They're like, and I'm a mother who is like, you can always come home. No matter where home is, no matter where I am, that is your home. And I believe that if something happens, in your child's life, no matter how old they are, you're their safe resting place, that they know that they can always come home and that it will be okay.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and and I know some people want them out and don't want them to come back, but that was never my philosophy. My philosophy was come home. So two of them did, um, and my youngest decided after doing 4 years of getting a communication degree that she was going to go to Italy and learn how to be a butcher. And she did, and she is. And it was like, okay, okay, but you know what? She's really good at what she does. And again, also, like, my mother was like, no, you're not going to do this. No, you're not. I always, and I still to this day tell them, you can do anything you want. And if that is your dream, I want you to do it. And if I can do anything to help that dream, I'm going to.
And
And so for 25 years, I've had these stories in my head.
okay,
And they're three distinct stories. And I've actually added a fourth one when I work out every day and I listen to my music. And a song from Electric Light Orchestra came on called Evil Woman. You might know the song. And it was ding, another idea for a story. So the rock music one about the band was coming in my head constantly. And I was like, okay, okay, okay. And I said, is that what I'm supposed to do? Because I always believed from a young age, just like at a young age, I knew that I lived in an Italian house where we don't talk about certain things. I also knew at a young age that I was supposed to do something, whether it was singing or acting, but it turned out to be writing. Would I have thought that years ago? No. But these stories just wouldn't go away. And when the rock story just went through me, I was like, I'm writing it. I'm writing it. And I used to host a book club at my house. And I started noticing all the books that we were reading had a pattern to it. And it's like, like this. And I said, I can write a better book than this.
hmm
I can write a book
hmm
that's different. So when I started writing, what I thought was one book ended up, and then I looked into self-publishing because people, if you go through a literary agent, they can squash your book right there. But even if a publishing company says, okay, we'll publish your book, they can sit on that book for years
hmm
and and they get the proceeds. So I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to self-publish. And I did a lot of research. I talked to a lot of self-publishing companies, and I dealt with like two or three really bad ones. And I went on a site called the Alliance of Self-Publishers,
hmm
and they rated them like red light, yellow light, green light. And two of the people were red lit, like stay away. So I called everybody who was a green light. And I spoke to them and whatever. And I landed on the woman who is my publishing consultant. And she told me that she went through the same thing with one of those bad self-publishers and, wasted $15,000. And so she was phenomenal. She is phenomenal. She will be with me until I stop writing because she's wonderful. And the way that we did this was I interviewed editors,
hmm
and then I interviewed the woman who does my book covers because she is a phenomenal artist.
Hmm.
She also designed my website. She does my website. She lays out my book because what people don't understand is that books have a certain conformity that they have to be in. There's no other you have to lay out the book this way. So she does that. And I have my marketing person who is the one person who works for me every day because marketing is probably the hardest part of this
Hmm.
because you are a new writer. I mean, I have 3 books in 1 year, which sounds great, but you have to constantly put your book in front of people's faces. And social media was, the one thing that everybody went to. And I do have a big social media platform. I'm on everything, but it may have in the past, it doesn't solicit the sales that you want.
Hmm.
Or that, and then you get hit with people who are constantly, I can review your book for this amount of money. And it's like, I always throw everything to my marketing person and say, what do you think? And a lot of times it's BS. So I have a great team, and without them, my editor is phenomenal. She doesn't change my book. She doesn't change the story at all. She might say, and when you write, sometimes you don't realize. She said, "You said this 5 pages ago," and I'm like, "Yes, I did. Take it." So we take it out. Um, and then as I was writing, I knew that a part of the book there were no cell phones, but I put caller ID in. And, her little editorial note is caller ID did not come out until this year. So that's why an editor is so important, because a good editor will catch all those little things
Hmm.
that you forgot didn't happen at that time. So, and the interesting thing is, I did a bunch of book fairs last year, and it was a general book fair. I went to Portland, and that's where I have 2 daughters, and I have a granddaughter. At one time that would have been like horrible for me to say, but she is. People tell you this, but the joy. I mean, my birthday was on Monday. And my daughter FaceTimed me, and it was her and my little Penelope, and they were singing Happy Birthday, and she was literally singing it, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't. It's just so wonderful."
Sure, sure.
Um, so yeah, 2 daughters and my granddaughter in Portland, and then my other daughter's in Brooklyn, and you know. Writing the books has changed my family dynamics. I'm not gonna lie.
And Beth, first, happy birthday, for it's only
Thank
two
you.
days.
No, I
And
don't know.
just I've got a question. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
you've written this saga, I mean, one is called Playing Hard, the other Playing High, and the other Playing Rough. Can you tell
Hmm.
us about these names? It's quite intriguing.
Okay, so that was the editor. So book one that I thought was book one, my publishing consultant said, no, these are 2 books. I
Okay.
said, okay. And I was already so I thought that was going to be the end. And then my editor said, continue the story.
Yeah.
Do
Hmm.
do not leave it there.
Yeah.
So I said, "Oh, okay, great." So then I started writing book three, and book three is again book three and book four. And I had to find the spot because I leave people in a cliffhanger. so that they want the next book. But there's also something in romance novels, because they are considered romance novels,
Hmm.
um, that when you're writing, you don't think about word count, but when you look on, Microsoft Word, it shows you the word count.
Yeah.
And when I write, it's like 140,000 words, and romance books genuine are about, like, some are 92 to 98,000 words.
Okay. Hmm.
And so I always have to break the book. And so I did that with book three. And so book four. So my editor came up with this idea of playing hard, because it's hard to, and so all the books will be playing something, because
Yeah. Okay.
that,
Yes. Uh-huh.
playing hard because it's hard to break into the music business. Playing high is the gritty, nasty side of the music business
Okay.
and
Yeah.
what happens. Playing rough, is a journey that they go on, that the two leads go on. And playing dirty is, the female lead character is
Hmm.
um, an Italian girl from Long Island,
Hmm.
and her father is, he has he's, I don't know, like Donald Trump was in New York back in the day, when he was just, you know, building buildings and all of that. It's not what we know now. He used to be, so her father is into land development, buying buildings and whatever, but he's also, the other side of him is he's a well-known leader of um the mob life.
Okay. I understand. Hmm.
And and that does play a part in the books.
Okay.
It
Hmm.
does play a part. So playing dirty, they have to do, there's some things that happen, and it's them doing things that they wouldn't necessarily have done in the past.
I understand.
And so I do know what, so we're playing around. Book five is written,
Hmm.
and I'm actually going, because I do a self-editing process where I read the book, and because I know my editor, I'll be like, oh, she's going to want to take that out. So I am doing that now. And book five was so long that I had to break it. And so book six is actually halfway done,
Wow.
because I do what's called immersive writing. And I read the rough drafts to my book club, and they were just like, don't stop writing, just keep writing. So my reviews have been, when people read the books, and because it's very dialogue driven. Yes, there's narrative that goes on, but it's the characters talking to each other.
Hmm.
And reviews that I've gotten, people said, I actually felt that I was in the room with these characters while this was going on. And to me, that's the highest praise. Like, if you feel that you're in part of the story, like you're observing it,
Hmm.
then you got the way I'm writing to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have
Yeah.
a question for you, Beth, because it seems fascinating saga. So, I mean, we have four titles. Do we know the next ones or not yet? You know,
I do know,
or perhaps it's secret. I don't want to.
well, I think book five and I'll throw it out to the team, but my marketing person is like, because I'm constantly telling her like, okay, so this is what's going to happen in book five, and
Mhm.
so we were kicking around ideas, and maybe book five will be called Playing Around. Um,
Oh, okay.
but gotta throw it to my editor who she creates like book three, the back blurb is I wrote most of it, but she went in and made it better.
Okay. Okay.
So I
Nice.
was like, okay, okay, I'm good with this.
And
I'm good
and
with this.
and what about, I mean, because it's fascinating stories, what about making TV serious about that? Is it something
Well,
which is a
I'm
possibility?
yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So in my books, um, they're rock band. So I've written songs,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
those songs are in the book. There's usually like three or four songs,
Okay.
and I do get inspired. And there's about four songs. Like I'll be going to bed, and a title of a song will come into my head.
Yeah.
And if you looked around me, I have all these little books that I get from my therapist's office. They have these, and I grab handfuls, and so I write down notes. So I'll wake up and I'll say, "Oh my God, that's a great song title," and I write it down, and I write it down, and I write it down. So I have four songs that should be going into book five. I also put a playlist of songs that are mentioned in the book that are relatable, like Stevie Wonder, "You Are the Sunshine of My Life."
Hmm. Yeah.
That is a very important song in the story. And so I make a playlist. And then, of course, I have the songs that I wrote. So when you say TV series, yes, first of all, it's the songs. And I
Hmm.
would love to work there. There's some bands that I'd like to work with. There are some people who I know collaborate, and I always say, "Hey, I got some good songs, and if you guys write the music, you know, I give you that." But I have been told that my series would make a great limited show on like a Netflix or a Hulu. And
Okay.
so when I finish book seven, and there will be book eight, which will tie everything up. Um, I I did a podcast with somebody who was a writer, and he was a screenwriter,
Hmm.
and he told me that there's certain well, I can't think of the word, certain programs that are specifically for screenwriting.
Okay.
And there are webinars. So when book seven is done, I am going to dabble into screenwriting.
Mm.
And I've already like, because I get pummeled with stuff that says, "Hey, if you think your story is good enough for a TV series," and I do think it would be great, and it would maybe be two seasons, um, because the story is so detailed. And the other thing about it is when I told you about self-publishing,
Hmm.
I own everything. Like all the people who are my team
Hmm.
are, I guess you can say that we are, I believe we are a team, but they're, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like they're, you know, I pay them to do this and then they're done.
Hmm.
And and my publishing consultant said, the first thing you need to do is open up your own publishing company, which I did. And so they always tell me, Beth, this is all you. We're here to push you along. So if I did screenwriting, and I know that, all these people want to have their own screenwriters, it would be like, fine, but I'm not going to let, I would want to be part of the screenwriting because I don't,
It's your
I
story.
have, I have seen stories that
Hmm.
I have read that have been made into a limited series, and they changed it. They changed
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
character, and
Mhm.
it's like, no, no, no,
So
you're not.
exactly. And so, Beth, it was really a pleasure, such a pleasure to have you with
Thank
us.
you.
It's very inspiring stories. And question I always ask my guests is, if there were like three tips you would like to leave our listeners with, what would it be? Could be moms, could be different things, but in terms of the lessons of life you've learned, what would it be?
Um, well, the first thing is if you think you can do something, do it. Don't let anybody tell you
Wo-
you cannot
Wonderful.
do it.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Um, because you can.
Yes.
And success comes from how hard you want it, you know.
Yes. Yes.
The second thing is, like we discussed before, no matter how dark things happen in your life,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
know, I had a bad divorce. I've had my brother who is closest to me have early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, and he passed away. And for me, like that was devastating because my father had brain cancer, and I was there I had to go down to Florida for 4 months. And so those are dark times, and the divorce was dark times.
Hmm.
But you will get to a place where the loss the loss never leaves you, but you learn to understand that this is the new normal. And no matter how dark, you're gonna crawl out of it.
Yeah. Mhm.
And you will be a better person because you went through it. And I know that sounds for some people who are struggling. No, you will get through it. It's
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the third for me,
Hmm.
and I said this before, being a mother is some people think it's a hard job. I had three children in 6 years, and I went on airplanes solo with my daughters. I didn't find having children to be that, oh, I can't deal with it. I always I always could deal with it. And I did it alone for a lot, even when I was married. It was like he was off doing business stuff. And my daughters are, now it's fun. We have fun because they're, you know, I'll just say they're young women, and we have fun. And I was afraid of them to read my books because there is a high sexual content in the books.
Hmm.
So I was afraid of them reading that. And they are saying, Mom, what are you doing? Like, what? But being a mother is probably it's the best project I've ever worked on is
Wow.
being a mother.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, thank you so much for telling your story. It's very inspirational. You went through changes, you overcame situation. And what's interesting actually is even you see the music, which was part very important in the start of your life, is coming back now in your book. So it's like a circle in a way, isn't it?
Yes, but music never left
It
me.
never left you
I
exactly,
took
yes.
my daughters to their first concert at Madison Square Garden,
Mhm.
and one of the bands, when I told them I was taking my daughters to, because my daughter really loved this band, and it was like head banging hard, and they're like, "You're taking your daughters to see that band?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah. I mean, sure, they want to go, so I'm taking them." And I've taken them to a few concerts of big bands, and it's just they grew up listening to music. It because it never left me,
Mhm.
so I handed it over to them, and so now we can enjoy stuff and go to concerts. Um, and
Wonderful.
it's just amazing. Again, as a mother, we put seeds into their head, and we hope they get it. And for a few years, you wonder like who these people are because they're teenagers, they think they could do anything. And then all of a sudden, they start doing things, and it's like, oh my God, they actually listen to me. They are doing the things, and I explained to them, and it's a wonderful thing. And my daughter, who is a mother, I was like, I thought she was going to be the worst. She's my oldest, and she was the most troublesome. And I was like, ugh. When she told me she was having a baby, I said to the other two, I don't know about this. She's a wonderful mother. And when I watch her, it's the way that I was with her. And I just sit back and look at it and say, okay,
Well, and this is really a great way to end our conversation. Being a mom, so important, looking after your children. And so, really, Beth, thank you so much for
thank you, Dan.
spending this
It
time with
was
us, for
fun.
sharing your stories. And obviously, I encourage all the listeners to go and to read your books because it's
Yes, buy
still
my
there.
box, buy
There's
my
the name,
books.
it's Beth Pellino-Dudzic. You will find them. And so thank you so much. It was very
Thank you.
inspiring. And of course, we are all waiting now to see the rest of the books and perhaps
Oh, they're
just
coming. They're
yeah,
coming.
they are coming. So thank you so much for your time and thank you for all our listeners to be with us. I hope you were very inspired by this story and you know that you have to be resilient, that everything is possible in life. Then, as Beth said, whenever you have a dream, go after your dream. Never give up. Give it your best. And challenges happen in life. Challenges can be opportunities, and on the other side of the challenge, there could be something really very good awaiting you. So,
Yes.
thank you everybody for listening, and I will see you at the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.